right. Welcome back to the next installment of No Homework Book Club. Um, we're going to get into, in this episode, we're going to get into chapters 2 and 3 of Agile Project Estimation and Planning. And there'll be a little bit about the pitfalls that can happen when you're planning software projects. And then some of the ways that Agile seeks to mitigate and address those issues. So, without further ado, let's see what we've got. No Homework Book Club presents Agile Estimation and Planning by Mike Cohn. Check it out. Get it on your bookshelf. Chapter 2 begins with another quote from Field Marshal Helmuth Graf von Moltke. Again, for some reason, I think Mike Cohn really likes this guy. No plan survives contact with the enemy. I like the Mike Tyson one, which is that everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Also, it all kind of points to the same thing, which is that when it's go time, your plan needs to change. So let's take a look at some shocking statistics. This book is a little old, so this stuff ain't that fresh. Alright, but back in 1992, Lederer and Prasad found that nearly 2/3 of projects significantly overrun their cost estimates. Alright, I wonder how much their research cost. 64% of the features included in the products are rarely or never used. That's Johnson's 2002. And last but not least, good old Standish, 2001, the average project exceeds its schedule by 100%. 100%. And whether or not these are, the specific stat isn't important, but I think anybody who's been around the block long enough knows, yes, your project is going to cost more and take longer than you thought. And whether it's 64% or where it is, there's plenty of teams out there building stuff that is a complete waste of time. Or, just not necessary. You gotta watch out for this stuff. That brings us to good old Cyril Northcote Parkinson. You may have heard of Parkinson's Law. That's the adage that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. And the term was first coined by Cyril back in a humorous essay he wrote for The Economist in 1955. Now, I tried to look it up, but The Economist is trying to charge me money to read their article from 1955. Okay? I'm not gonna pay for that. So I'm just gonna take it at their word that it was a humorous essay. I wanted to check it out for myself, but we'll just have to take their word for it. But doing a little bit of additional reading, there's also Parkinson's Law of Triviality. Now, this is not in the book itself. I added this extra, but it's something that's worth noting because while Parkinson's Law is most often talked about in regard to personal productivity, it rears its ugly head in group settings where counterproductive tendencies are ever present. Parkinson's Law of Triviality states that people within organizations often give undue time and attention to trivial matters. Right? So go back to the previous slide where your project's coming in late. You're building features nobody wants. This is why. It's lacking the ability to discern the things that really drive results and return on investment, failing to discern those from other mundane tasks that have, instead of a 10x return on investment, they have a 1-to-1 return on investment, or even a negative return on investment. That's how you run a programmer move in this industry, is to be able to tell the difference. And now, while Parkinson's Law could be used as a way to say, work is just going to fill the time allotted for its completion. So let's just set unrealistic project deadlines then, and it'll get them done. Well, it's not always fair to teams because things do take time. Things do take a finite amount of time, realistically, you know. But you might approach things in a different way, or maybe even game your numbers if you needed to. So having some time boxing is actually important in Agile. And an extreme example of this is China builds the skyscraper in 19 days. Fastest skyscraper ever built. So this giant building built in 19 days. Now when you look into the details here, it's a little bit of fudging the numbers because they manufactured all of the different floors in like these modular components in a warehouse, and that took months to actually build those components. They were shipped to the job site, and then they were basically snapped in like Legos to build this giant tower. They had crews working 24/7 for 19 working days. 19 working days. Now, the other thing that they don't tell you about in this one is that the project actually got paused in the middle of construction for about a year because they had some issues with an airport that was nearby and making sure that they had the proper government approvals and such. So 19 days was really more like 2 years, but the actual on-site construction was 19 working days. And that's still pretty amazing. I mean, considering, some software projects I've seen. So, activities don't finish early. So, features are the unit of the customer's value. And really what we should be doing is planning for features, not activities. Right? Because activities don't finish early. Due to that fact, lateness is passed down on the schedule. Activity A gets late, activity B becomes late. Many of these activities that you might break down in a typical like work breakdown structure, classic project management concept, they're not independent. They're not unrelated to each other, in other words. So when one of these tasks takes longer than you thought, a lot of times people think, oh, we'll just, we'll really give it a good go to not do that again. Mike Cohn is suggesting, and I would agree with him here, that what you should be doing is gaining knowledge about how long that kind of an activity takes and making sure that you reassess the length of time you're planning for all similar activities. Readjusting your plan, basically. We can walk and chew bubblegum, right? I've been asked this literally by business sponsors and stakeholders about executing complicated software projects and trying to accomplish more than our teams have the capacity to actually do feasibly. It's not really exactly chewing bubblegum and walking when we're talking about developing like software systems. It's not analogous. So another reason why the traditional approaches are failing is planning on multitasking. So Clark and Wheelwright, they found that your ability to focus and deliver value drops after you're focusing on more than 2 tasks. And with 2 tasks, you can kind of get stuck on one or get bored with one. You can shift gears and pick up something else. But when we start doing more than that, you're getting into a lack of ability to focus. And that's also played out in my experience as well, where I've found that it's very common that your development team, each individual is probably only completing about 2 or 3 different work items, be there a user story or a bug ticket or whatever you want to call it. 2 to 3 things is generally where people end up landing. Overload and gridlock. This is just related stuff. I mean, assigning work to individuals rather than to groups exacerbates this problem. A lot of times an agile team ends up being a collection of people with specialized skill sets, and they have only a particular work stream that they're capable or allowed to work in, and there's handoffs. All that breeds inefficiencies in the team's capabilities. Sometimes it has to be done for practical reasons, but a lot of times your team ends up being a bunch of individuals who just are all, they showed up to the same stand-up and they work in the same code base, but they all sort of just work independently next to each other. It's not really truly teamwork. And that's a difficult hair to split sometimes, but one of the things that exacerbates that is really focusing on a high level of utilization of individuals. So trying to book out everyone to 100% capacity. Making sure that each individual has 13 story points every sprint, because that's what they should be able to complete, is 13. It's like equivalent to loading up a highway 100% capacity. All right, you're going to be stuck, you're going to have a bad time. And then you're going to be like this educational poster where the teachers and the parents and the students are all working together in a very inefficient manner there. So who are you planning for? This is kind of a little bit of a dirty question, I think, because sometimes you might not want to know the answer to this. But many traditional plans are created with the assumption that we're going to do everything in the plan, and then work gets prioritized and sequenced for the convenience of the development team, not prioritized by its value to users and customers. Right? And then we'll also sneak in a little bit of refactoring in there as well while we're in there. It's like a weird surgery analogy that always gets made, like, while we're in there, we're just going to also do some of this refactoring. It's definitely not going to cause any bugs. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it's an issue. Who are you planning for? Are you focused on your own staff, your own team, your own career, your own project? Or are you thinking about your end users? Are you thinking about your customers? It might change how you would sequence things. It might change how you would prioritize work. And then also, just uncertainty. We rely on expert estimates for all this stuff, but I always have to remind people that estimates are not actuals. Okay, they are estimates. They're called estimates because they are estimates. They're just a projection of a possibility, a probability, right? At the end of the day, things do take as long as they take with the team that you have. You can't think about if you had an absolute perfect team of like Superman and Batman coding away. You have real humans who like maybe go on vacation, or maybe their kid gets sick, or whatever. Maybe they get pulled into a bunch of silly meetings for something, or your office decides to throw a party and everyone's drunk at 3 o'clock. Who knows what's going on? But these are the things about it. Like you have to be able to roll with some level of uncertainty. And I guess that's it. That's all Mike Cohn has about where are the pitfalls of traditional project management. It's not accounting for a lot of those things that those of us who've been around the block a few times know are just part of the gig, you know? So, chapter 3 introduces an agile approach, and this is the way that we're going to actually address all of these things. This is how we're going to mitigate those issues. So, we start off with the 4 agile values or principles, I think is what they're called. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Just kind of the main theme of this talk here. But let's check these out. Taken collectively, the 4 value statements lead to software development processes that are highly iterative and incremental. And they deliver coded and tested software at the end of each iteration. We want to work as one team, work in short iterations, deliver something each iteration, focusing on business priorities, and then inspect and adapt. And these are all kind of tied in together. I don't know if you've ever written code before, but think about this. If you are writing code, you start to get into this sweet spot where you write code and then you run your code. And then you see if it is working as you expected. And if it's not, you can make adjustments and get it to a good, healthy state and then continue building on it. And you reach a kind of a productive cadence of writing and then checking, and then writing and checking. We want to do the same thing on the next level of the hierarchy here with our software system and our customers and users, for example. Or maybe even just like, say, QA and maybe power users who are checking out things before a fully packaged release, beta testers, etc. Like, you want to put things out there and see how they're working. Make sure that they're doing well. Because, I think anybody who's written code has gotten into this situation at least once where you are writing a bunch of stuff and then you're not checking it, and then you hit run and like something's broken. Maybe many things are broken, and now you have to go back and spend all this time trying to figure out what the heck was it. I changed something. What did I change? What did it? I was just having a conversation also this weekend, and the other side of this coin is the point where your team is addressing a bug, like an unknown issue with your system, and then you're trying a bunch of stuff, and then like the bug is gone. It's working now, but you have no idea what was broken or how it got fixed. And you're like, well, just don't ever touch it again, and you'll be fine. Yeah. Agile, there's a lot of different flavors of it. Everyone's got their own book to sell. Everyone's got their own, consulting service on how to do it. But the point of it is really just about feedback loops. It's about incorporating short iterations. And that's kind of the fundamental engine of Agile. Also, a successful Agile team has to have a we're all in it together mindset. All right. If your development work for your sprint commitment is done and your QA is underwater trying to test it, help test your stuff, guys. Okay? Work together. Work together as a team. Step outside your job description for a moment when the going gets tough. Okay? And another thing that's really important to know, and this is usually for people outside of the Scrum team, but I see people get this wrong so often. The customer is the person who has made the decision to fund the project or to buy the software. A lot of times people think that the customer is their user. Customer might be your user if you're selling directly to your customer. But a lot of times the customer is not your user. A lot of times the customer is somebody else. The point is the customer has money on the table. They have literal money on the table. Users who are not putting their money up are not your customers. So make sure you always keep that in mind. So let's contrast Agile to Waterfall. On the Agile project, there's no grand delineation of phases, no upfront requirements, followed by analysis, followed by architectural design, then dev, and then testing, and UAT, and release. It's kind of true. We have all those things in Agile. They're just condensed down into a short period of time. So they do make a caveat here in the book. You may put a very short design, modeling, or other phase at the front end of the project, but once the project has begun, all of the work happens concurrently within each iteration. It's a lot easier said than done, quite frankly. Like, it depends what you're doing. If you have something that's very well defined, like you're building an API to a specification that's provided to you by a third party, you probably don't necessarily need design phases and such. Maybe some level of like architectural planning so that you just have a good structure to your code base that can be consistently applied, outside of your own team as well. Because the other piece of this that you're not thinking about, Mike Cohn, is your Scrum team can do this really well independently, but your Scrum team is probably one of many Agile teams in an organization doing similar work. And having some uniformity in architectural patterns is of a benefit to being able to sometimes rebalance teams. People might change where they're working. And also just to having like a coherent structure to the overall code base. You need some kind of pattern to adhere to. And it's one thing that's a really huge gap in Agile, quite frankly, is that Agile tells you all this stuff about how to plan work. It doesn't tell you anything about how to do the work, how to actually write the code, how to make good code, how to make quality software, what tools to choose, what technologies to select. There's a whole other aspect of the game here that Agile doesn't even address. Okay, it doesn't help your technical teams be better at technical execution, and it doesn't help your strategic management tier make better decisions. All right, so yeah, what was it? Agile will just help you to fail faster if you suck. And Waterfall versus Agile, this is the lovely picture. Instead of going down the cascading waterfall, you see, we're going to do this Agile loop-de-loop. Whee! And that's much better. Really, it's all the same stuff. But the point is that you just don't take a long-ass time to get through this stuff. Do it quickly. Take a moment. Observe what do we need to do better. And then do it again. That's the thing about it. That's really all there is to it. So, sprint increment. All right. This is a really good way to focus on business value. And it's something that a lot of teams can neglect. More crucial than how long your iteration is, or if you're even doing iterations, you might not have that concept, but you might use a milestone instead if that's the case. But it's essential that you focus on doing something that's actually useful to somebody. bring some actual value to the table. It's got to be small enough to fit into your iteration length, whatever you're time boxing this at. It's typically 2 weeks or 3 weeks. All right. But in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you can do something interesting. Focus on that. Prioritize that above everything else. Your team will still have additional capacity to fix random bug. It will still have additional capacity to address some degree of production support, provided it's not a complete hellscape. And you're going to be able to do something that's potentially shippable at the end of each iteration. Now, that's a big deal because you can actually show value. Now, we say potentially shippable because when you get a little bit more advanced in this stuff, you may not want to release it out, or you may want to feature flag it so that it's not, necessarily put in front of your end users. You may want to plan and package multiple iterations worth of work before you actually roll out a release to end users. That's something you may choose to do. Other people may just push to prod constantly, maybe even throughout the sprint. It's really cool to work on teams where you're able to just push stories out into prod. Boom, like it's a random ass Tuesday. Sure, just send it. Just get it out there. It's really nice. It's not always appropriate, but sometimes it's possible. And we're still talking about prioritizing user value. Demonstrate a commitment to the business priorities by delivering the features in the order specified by your product owner. Right? Product owner, it's a very important role. If you're doing Scrum, you need a good product owner who can prioritize work well and understanding how to balance things like tech debt and other kinds of technical initiatives that are also important, bug work, production support, research, innovation, something that gets overlooked a lot. And then in addition to that, your prioritized feature stuff. It's a delicate juggling act. Using your sprint increment is a great way to stay focused on that. Making sure that you're doing something interesting every sprint, focusing on that. Then once you've got your big rock in the jar, you can fill in your smaller rocks around that. And then the second way that Agile teams focus on completing and delivering user valued features rather than on completing isolated tasks. I guess that's just saying that's what it is. Focus on features rather than tasks. And that has a lot to do with your product owner. And how are you writing requirements? How are you structuring features? How are you decomposing them into stories? A weak product owner has to rely on their engineers to write the stories for them. Okay? And engineers and developers will write your feature out as a list of technical tasks. They're almost guaranteed to do it. I don't know why, that's just the way that it works. So the skilled product owner has the ability to dabble just enough in the technical solutioning of things and to steer the flow of the river into a way that's user focused. So it's about guiding your technical resources who must participate in the drafting of requirements. They have to. Okay? But a good product owner has the ability to steer them into packaging those things into user value components. The user story. So this one's an interesting topic. It's something that a lot of people like to talk about, get hung up on. I've seen people be really weird about this stuff. It's not really that important, to be quite frank. I mean, it's not really that important. User story is a brief description of functionality as viewed by a user or a customer of the system. They are free form. There's no mandatory syntax. unless your organization has decided to make you do like as a I want to so that, or like a given when then, or other sorts of things that you just are required to do. None of that actually matters, okay? And what you'll find is when you're given something like this, you'll be writing a story for, I don't know, some sort of back end service that has no actual user, and you're writing as a, and you'll be stumped. As a dev, as a system, you know. Some user stories have a true customer. Use this format in that case. But if you don't have an actual customer, throw it away. All right? You want to write things in given when then, and now you're jumping through weird mental gymnastics to write out 5 paragraphs of requirements that could have been 5 bullet points. Okay, I guess if you want to do that, you're losing the forest for the trees, though, because user stories are supposed to be lightweight. The work to gather and document them is not done up front, and writing a lengthy specification is not the point. We want to do these requirements just in time, because what it's really about is having a conversation with your team. And your artifact has to be there to represent and to document the conversation you've had so that we don't forget about it. Right? We can go back and look at it, and it's like taking notes. That is important. But what those notes look like, they just have to be useful to your team, to being able to understand, oh yeah, we talked about this, and don't do that, and do this. And this is who it's for, and this is why we're doing it. It's about a shared understanding. Is the true user story, is this abstract concept that exists between your relationship as human beings. And then the user story ticket itself is merely the artifact that documents basically that conversation happened. That's the best way of thinking about this stuff. The shared understanding. So, have that conversation as often as needed. Continue to do it. I would also encourage, if you are doing anything front-endy, pictures, say 1,000 words. Okay, make sure that you've linked in Figmas. Make sure that you've put in workflow diagrams. It's important to think about, how is someone going to have to think about building this? What is the user experience going to be? And being able to provide that to a development team makes you a really good requirement writer. It's really tough when you're trying to order something that is visual in nature, and then you've just written verbose, indented bullet point list. You need pictures. You need pictures to explain what it is, and mock-ups and such. Writing acceptance criteria is like making a wish with an evil genie. Okay? If it can be misinterpreted to screw you over, it's going to happen. Alright? So you have to make sure that you make the wish very perfectly catching all the weird edge cases, all the things that could go wrong. So learn and adjust that plan as you go. And this is our recurring theme. So new capabilities that we bring in and we deliver with the product, learn from them. There's a lot of times we make this assumption, hey, if we do this feature, it's going to lead to increased conversion. And then you do it, and then you never validate if it worked or not. And you just move on to next project and next feature. The follow through is critical. It's critical. And a lot of companies are completely sleeping on it, completely undisciplined. You have to do it. And guess what? If you're trying to drive conversion on your website, you need A/B testing. Sorry to break it to you. Stop your feature work and put in the infrastructure to A/B test, because you don't know if what you're doing is driving the results and intended behavior that you're seeking. you need to be able to be scientific about it. So, on the Agile project, we're going to use this flow of new capabilities and knowledge to guide ongoing work. And failing to acquire new knowledge leads to plans built on the assumption that you know everything necessary at the beginning. It's the genius in the tower coming up with the master plan. And I'm sorry, but you're probably not that genius. Like, maybe somebody can do that, but for the rest of us mere mortals, we have to learn as we go. Ward Cunningham said that it's more planning what you want to learn, not what the product will be in the end, according to Van Schoendervoort. So take that for what it's worth. So my favorite analogy when we're comparing and contrasting Agile and waterfall or traditional project management is with a race. So traditional project is like running a 10-kilometer race. You know exactly how far the finish line is, and your goal is to get there as quickly as possible. All right, it's defined. Do it as fast as you can. On the Agile project, however, and one of the reasons we use the terminology of sprint is that we don't know where the finish line is. We're going to set a time box, and we are going to run as far as we can in that time. And then we're going to see what kind of distance we covered in the time. So see the differences between setting a set distance versus setting a set amount of time to work in. This is the big difference in how you should think about Agile project management versus traditional project management. You know when you'll finish your sprint, but you don't know exactly what you'll deliver. Now there's multiple levels of planning here, and we're just kind of talking about some of the ones that are relevant to a delivery team itself. Release planning, iteration planning, and daily planning. This is the planning onion. I guess plans are like onions. There's all these different layers to the plan, and everything should kind of have alignment from the strategic down to the day-to-day. All right, so one of my favorite terms to use, progressive elaboration of the plan. So the goal of release planning is to determine an answer to the questions of the scope and schedule and resources for a project. Or it could be a feature project. Sometimes those are kind of interchangeable in the Agile world. It's like what we're doing nowadays. It's the flavor of the quarter, right? And the release planning is figuring out that bigger picture, right? Hopefully, you're not going... I would say hopefully you're not planning more than 3 months. If you are, I would highly suggest you figure out for your own sanity how to break it down smaller to fit within 3 months. Because once you get bigger than that, it starts to become very dangerous. You lose sight of any kind of ability to actually make rational projections beyond that. And if you have to, you're going to have to, but just know that your plan is probably pretty janky. All right, so then the next level is iteration planning. And this is the one that we actually call just like planning oftentimes. A lot of teams are familiar with it, or sprint planning. Happens at the beginning of an iteration. We think about the work that we just accomplished in the last iteration, and we try to commit to about the same amount to hold a sustainable pace. And the product owner is working to identify what's the highest priority. And then finally, there's daily planning. And the daily stand-up is that. That was one thing that I thought was actually interesting from this book, because I've been going to daily stand-ups for like 10 years now, and I never really thought of it as a planning meeting, but it actually is. It actually is when you think about it. It's like a little baby planning, so it's very cute. And then outside of the concern of the actual team itself and the book itself, here is the higher level plannings that occur with the big bosses up there. And that is it. Wow. What did you think about all of that stuff? It was kind of a lot to talk about, slightly meandering, but generally the same themes are coming up, which is that we want to be iterative, work as a team, try not to be stupid, try your best not to do that, trying to focus on doing things that are valuable and shunning things that are a waste of your time. This is the key to mastering, managing software projects, basically. And I think that last part is in my opinion the biggest one. You have to learn how to say no. You have to have the courage to say no to things because it allows you to actually and truly complete the things you've said yes to. It's very easy to say yes to everything and then apologize when you failed to complete your work. But you aren't going to win friends and influence people that way. You've got to complete the things that you're saying to do, and then you've got to work furiously to bat away all the distractions. So use your plannings, your daily planning. We got to get this done. Cancel any meetings that aren't serving that goal for the day. Your sprint, likewise, put on hold fixing that bug that, random person is crying about. Sorry, you're going to have to wait another 2 weeks because this is the most important thing we can do. Block it out. Same with your release planning. Once you know what kind of a feature is the most important thing that you could do for your users and your customers, you need to be extremely vigilant in batting away any distractions. Don't let people drag you into talking about this random, not important tech debt thing, not this silly, pie in the sky, feature that is unrealistic and not ready to even work on yet. Don't let people drag you into endless meetings. Don't let your team get dragged into endless meetings. Defense is the name of the game. So, I don't know. Let me know what you think about all this. If I'm wrong about something, I want to hear your thoughts too. I'd love to have a discussion and to hear some differing perspectives on that stuff. But that's where we're at. And yeah, next up, I think, are some more specific techniques on how to estimate work at kind of the user story or the ticket level. So there's a couple of different techniques, story pointing and ideal days that we'll cover. And that's some interesting stuff as well. So until the next episode, yeah, later.